Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to another episode of the Third Eye Productions. Today I'm going to be discussing organizing for dual power, which requires community horizontal organizing in small groups of maybe 8 to 10 people that are connected together community to community, like what the group Freedom Cells are doing. And although this particular group consists of mostly anarchists, some on the left and some on considered to be right-wing, that are operating off the common principles of freedom, self-determination, and autonomy, which allows people to be able to work together without compromising their own moral principles and effectively build dual power in the structure at the same time. And one of the reasons why me and other activists are calling for more horizontal organizing is because we have learned from the mistakes of revolutionaries that came before us. Historically, every revolutionary that decided to put themselves in a leadership position, and once they became a threat to the establishment, they were killed or they were taken down. This is why we believe in horizontal organizing can be more effective when it's done properly, because it requires collective education and group participation. So if a member for some reason or another gets killed, like historian Dr. John Henry Clark would say, you bury the man and you continue the plan. This type of horizontal organizing will not come without trial and error, but it is necessary in being able to produce dual power and economic democracy on a large scale, in which there are many aspects to dual power that I won't be able to cover in one video. So I will focus on some of the ones that are more significant, like a solidarity economy, which includes building land trusts, which will also allow agricultural cooperatives and local food sovereignty to flourish, along with the credit unions, stuff we would need, and cooperatives, and like decentralized currencies also. And some of the things I listed on this graph will be on some of the future videos I'm going to make later that will allow communities to become more sustainable, specifically the eco-village you will see at the top of the graph. Horizontal organizing is an engagement of solidarity, which doesn't matter whether it's called freedom cells, community councils, or community pods, which is designed to collectively organize communities around the human need rather than human greed, which also allows communities to work toward the need to fulfill the agenda of self-policing our communities rather than self-policing for the police state. A people's assembly is another way to produce more community camaraderie when building dual power in the form of mutual aid and a solidarity economy which requires communal or mutual trust, which is unfortunate, which is the antithesis of what some demonstrations turn out to be, like you see on the streets, like race riots, divide and rule, which are propagated obviously by the establishment. So building a solidarity economy and organizing horizontally, we will find out the needs of the communities we are organizing in. It will also discover and acknowledge our commonalities as humans, which will help good people from becoming victims of hierarchical dehumanization's agenda from political or corporate oligarchs, which is a clear motive for some of the technocrat corporate elites, which is to justify the dehumanization of people they call useless eaters, but is also justifies in the minds of them the concept of transhumanism, which would make them think they're gods by doing this evolutionary humanity thing, which is another topic for another video. And another point is, when you look at how the establishment benefits by conditioning people to hate each other, which creates the conditions of divide and rule, and how man-made poverty created by the establishment legitimizes the dehumanization of the oppressed, which can only be achieved by a mass indoctrination process which ultimately empowers the oppressor and makes the people unwilling or unable to rid themselves of the disease of internalized oppression, which is why change cannot come unless we learn to do and think outside of the narratives of those who oppress us. So on the subject of cooperatives, besides the importance of getting to know and trust the people you are starting a cooperative with, I think we should have to understand how different cooperative businesses are run and managed compared to hierarchical business structures, in which I would suggest co-op academies should be opened up in every state in the US and abroad. And there are different ways to get funding to start cooperatives, And the first thing I would suggest is to encourage people that have excess money to stop giving it to corrupt politicians and start investing it in your communities. Though not just through mutual aid programs, but also to help crowdfund cooperative businesses. And besides co-op academies, there are other ways to get funding to start up a co-op businesses, but depending on where the funding is coming from, it would depend on whether the worker owners actually have control of it or not. So what I would do, I would recommend people that have those co-op startups to check into who's funding you and what the conditions behind it is. So depending on what kind of co-op you are part of will depend on what kind of pay disparity there is when you first join. Because the people that have been worker co-owners since the beginning of the startup will obviously get paid a little bit more money, so which doesn't mean that the workers that just recently joined won't be part of the decision-making process. And also, depending on the kind of co-op will depend on the amount of money that is required to become a member. And like I said, there is organizations that are supportive and will help you with your co-op startup. During this video, I would flash some of the organizations up on the screen that can help people that are in need or interested in doing it. And if you feel it's necessary to start a co-op movement as a means of educating and motivating people to be part of a worker empowerment agenda, then I don't think it would be a problem with other like-minded people that either are out of work or either part of a worker union that still have problems receiving adequate pay or are forced to work in dangerous or harsh conditions. Which reminds me of what's going on at Amazon, that it demonstrates that worker unions alone won't adequately address workplace issues. Even those that say they have paid their union fees, and which doesn't surprise me as to why worker unions have been decreasing in the workplace for a number of years now, and worker cooperatives have been increasing in the last 5 years at least. So when you talk about worker cooperative movements, what will make it stronger is to join a federation of worker cooperatives that can assist each other with resources, which I would recommend working with groups like Corporation Jackson, Black Socialists of America, Symbiosis, and a few others, which are also a part of what we call the dual power agenda, which this video is actually about. And when we talk about dual power strategy, it basically means creating an alternative system that can challenge the current power structure and make it irrelevant. And the alternative system's goal is to produce agricultural, water, and land sovereignty on a local level, like credit unions and alternative decentralized currency also. And now I'm going to show you a couple of videos showing you that it is possible to create agricultural and water sovereignty locally, which should depend on how much land we obtain through land trust and other means. But check it out.
Spring has sprung, and with the first tender crops coming out of the ground, local food is on its way. But a growing number of small farms have taken root, literally, among city landscapes.
We are homegrown city farms, and being able to provide food for the community is pretty awesome. You know, all the grocery stores are left out of it, all the food that's grown from far away is left out of it, and these people are literally traveling maybe a few miles to come and get their food from us, and that feels really good.
Mariah Smith-Overman and her partner Collier Reeves are renting this lot to farm just 3 miles from downtown Durham.
But this is the first rotation of things that are kind of coming up in a timely manner. We plant, 4 beds at a time.
This quarter-acre lot is a prime example of urban farming, where growers take unused or vacant lots and transform them into sustainable areas to grow food for the community.
I mean, the possibilities are pretty endless. There's so much open space, and you can see open space vertically. You can see it in empty lots. We're really just trying to have as much bed space.
It's hard not to be taken in by the humble austerity of the website Make Fresh Water. Under the simple header reads a phrase, help people. The site then lays out in a simple and straightforward manner how to solve the right to potable drinking water denied to millions of people on the planet, a 3D printable freshwater maker. Kem Schnitzler has provided the STL files for his water maker and outlines how it works. The device consists of a body, a hopper, and a cap, all of which are to be printed in a UV-resistant material. Placed in the sun, the water maker heats up to 85 degrees Celsius until steam begins to form, condensing along the insides of the device's hopper. The condensed water streams along the sides of the funnel and into a reservoir lining the edge of the device. And that's it. You have distilled water. But the water still needs a little bit of salt because distilled water has no minerals. Finally, there's a link to a Dropbox folder where you can download the files for the water maker yourself. Together with a plea for help from Kem, who asks that people share this blog with friends and families in a bid to take the water maker into a wider audience and give it to people in the third world or without access to clean water.
And one of the good things about having access to food and water is that it can be used as a form of mutual aid to help people in need, which is part of a dual power agenda, which is to create alternative to hierarchical structure to food, water, and land, and even localized decentralized currencies that I will be talking about in the extended version of this video if you tune into it on my Spotify channel. Even though mutual aid alone won't solve all the problems associated with poverty and struggling people, but it can and does make a big difference in the lives of people in need of assistance. And the reason why our government often does not do an adequate job of sufficiently helping people is because when our government creates social programs within a capitalist institution, it doesn't mix very well because they're like polar opposites. And that's one of the reasons why our governmental capitalist institutions are not very good at basic things like giving people inadequate stimulus checks as a result of a pandemic or catastrophes. And they are not likely to give people any kind of legitimate debt forgiveness. And if they do, it will most likely come in some form of oppressive conditions attached to it. Because capitalists don't believe in doing something for nothing. And they know the public can easily be deceived by their fake philanthropic rhetoric, just by the way they phrase certain things. For example, they would say stuff like we're going to give money to the poor, but instead they would say we will invest in the poor, which basically means they expect a return on their investment, which is another reason why we have to build communal mutual solidarity. Which is why cooperative credit unions is not only an asset to cooperative businesses, it gives members of the credit unions more control over their money, and they are not required to engage in risky investments, which is why you never hear about credit unions being bailed out by government banks, or by the government period. I'm aware of several instances where many local businesses were saved with loans by credit unions as a result of lockdowns and the pandemic, which is part of the dual power strategy, which is not to just have control of the money, but ultimately create a decentralized currency. Which some people talk about Bitcoin as a viable alternative currency option, but I'm the kind of person that doesn't like to put all my eggs in one basket, which is why I think there should always be a physical money as an alternative or an option. Because I heard an insider saying there is a back door for the elitists to hack into the controlled digital currency, which is a problem in itself. So I'm going to end the podcast by letting you know if you're interested in hearing the extended version of this episode, you can go to Spotify and click on the Third Eye Productions to Building Dual Power. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next podcast.